Have you ever looked around at your life and thought, I've got too much, but none of it feels right? You've added the habits, the goals, the people, the plans, but instead of feeling more fulfilled, you feel more distracted, more anxious, more off-center. That's the first sign. Not that you need more, but that you might need less. Less noise, less pressure, less of what doesn't serve your growth. Because here's the truth. Real change often begins not when you add something, but when you start subtracting. Now think about this. What if the most powerful transformations in your life didn't come from loud declarations or big moves, but from quiet, intentional choices? Not changing the world around you, but releasing what weighs you down from within. That's the second sign. When your soul starts whispering, it's time to let go. And here's the third. What if the path to peace, purpose, and inner strength wasn't about building something new, but about removing everything that's in the way? No fanfare, no announcements, no one needs to know. Just you, choosing, deliberately, to let go of what no longer serves who you're becoming. This isn't about running away or giving up. It's about clearing space, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, so you can finally breathe, finally see, finally live, fully and intentionally. In today's world, we're told to add more habits, add more success, add more noise. But the Stoics saw things differently. They believed that simplicity, clarity, and purpose aren't found by adding, but by removing. And that's what this episode is all about. Inspired by Stoic wisdom, we're going to explore 10 things you should quietly eliminate from your life, not to escape the world, but to show up in it with more power, more focus, and more peace. These aren't dramatic changes. You don't need to post about them. You don't need to ask permission. They're personal, subtle, and often invisible to the outside world. But they make all the difference. Because when you clear out what's draining you, mentally, emotionally, physically, you make room for something deeper. A sense of direction, a sense of calm, and a life that actually feels like yours. Each of these 10 things is something we all carry at some point: fears, habits, expectations, distractions, comparisons, and each of them, if left unchecked, quietly pulls us away from who we really are. This video isn't about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you've always been, beneath the noise, the clutter, the pressure. It's about simplifying to strengthen, letting go to move forward, and choosing peace over performance. So, if you've ever felt like your life is too full of the wrong things, this episode is for you. If you've ever sensed that your energy is scattered, your focus is fading, or your heart just feels heavy, this is your invitation to release. To subtract with purpose. Because in the quiet space that follows, you'll find clarity, you'll find power, and maybe for the first time in a long time, you'll find yourself again. Let's begin. 1. Fear of judgment. Reclaiming your right to be yourself. How many times have you stopped yourself from saying what you truly think, just because someone might judge you? Maybe you didn't share that idea in a meeting. Maybe you laughed less loudly than you wanted to. Maybe you stayed quiet when something inside you was screaming to speak up. And why? Because you were afraid. Afraid of what someone else might think. Afraid of sounding foolish. Afraid of not being accepted. Afraid of being misunderstood. This fear is quiet. It doesn't always shout. It whispers. It shows up as hesitation, as second-guessing, as shrinking into a smaller version of yourself just to stay safe. And over time, that fear doesn't just affect what you do. It begins to shape who you are. You stop taking risks. You filter your personality. You live a quieter, more cautious life, not because it's what you want, but because it feels safer than being seen and judged. But here's the truth the Stoics understood, and it's one you might need to hear today. People aren't thinking about you nearly as much as you think they are. Most of us live in our own little worlds, our own stress, insecurities, and distractions. While you're worried about how others see you, they're doing the exact same thing about themselves. That moment you stumbled over your words? Forgotten. That time you wore something bold? Barely noticed. That opinion you thought would be ridiculed? It probably faded from their memory by lunchtime. We give away so much of our energy, so much of our identity, to imagined judgment, to an audience that's not really paying attention. And even if they were? Even if someone did judge you, what then? Do their opinions pay your bills? Do they build your dreams? Do they wake up inside your skin every morning and walk through your struggles? No, they don't. Epictetus, One of the wisest Stoic philosophers said it simply: if you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. That might sound harsh at first, but look deeper. He wasn't telling you to be foolish. He was giving you permission to be misunderstood while you grow. Because growth is messy, and bold, and sometimes awkward. You'll try new things that don't work. You'll speak up and not everyone will agree. You'll step outside the lines others have drawn for you, and yes, they might look at you funny. But progress doesn't come from pleasing everyone. It comes from having the courage to be real. So how do you begin to let go of this fear? Start by noticing when it's happening. The next time you pause or hold back because you're worried about what someone might think, ask yourself, am I acting out of my values or out of fear? That question alone can wake you up. It reminds you that you have a choice, to live by someone else's opinion or by your own truth. And here's a simple practice. Start doing small things that make you slightly uncomfortable, but reflect your authentic self. Post that idea online, even if it feels vulnerable. Wear that outfit that expresses who you are. Speak up in the room where you usually stay silent. You don't need to make a grand leap. You just need to stretch the edge of your comfort zone, bit by bit. Breath by breath. Each time you act despite fear, you retrain your brain. You prove to yourself, I can survive discomfort. I can be seen. I can be judged, and still be okay. And more than that, you feel free. Because when you stop living for other people's approval, you start living for something far more powerful, your own inner alignment. Surround yourself with people who support that. People who don't need you to shrink to make them comfortable. People who love your voice, even when it shakes. And most importantly, remind yourself often, the goal isn't to avoid being judged. The goal is to build the kind of inner strength that no judgment can control. So ask yourself, at the end of your life, do you want to look back and say, I lived safe, small, and silent to avoid disapproval? Or, I lived boldly, imperfectly, but true to myself? Because the truth is, the world will forget most of what you did, but you will remember what you didn't do, out of fear. And you deserve better than that. Now that you've begun releasing the need for others' approval, it's time to look inward once more, at the people you allow into your life. Because some of the deepest noise doesn't come from strangers' opinions. It comes from relationships that quietly drain you. Let's move on to number 2, cutting out toxic relationships. 2. Toxic relationships, protecting your energy. Quietly, there's a certain kind of exhaustion that sleep can't fix. It's not physical tiredness. It's emotional fatigue, the kind that shows up after spending time with someone who, no matter how long you've known them, just makes you feel smaller, drained, or on edge. Sometimes it's a sharp tension, like walking on eggshells. Other times, it's more subtle, a pattern of being dismissed. Constant criticism dressed up as just being honest. One-sided support where you're always giving and rarely receiving. We often don't notice it right away. Toxic relationships have a way of blending into the background. They become familiar, habitual, and eventually, they start to feel normal. But here's what they quietly do. They make you doubt your worth. They weaken your confidence. They keep you second-guessing yourself and your voice. And worst of all, they rob you of your energy. You leave the conversation feeling tense. You replay what was said hours later. You question your reactions instead of trusting your instincts. That's when you know, it's not just a rough patch. It's a drain on your emotional well-being. But here's the part we rarely talk about. You don't have to make a big announcement to walk away from these relationships. You don't need to explain. You don't need to justify. You don't even need to label it as toxic to anyone else. Because real change, it can happen quietly. Just like clutter in your home. You don't always need to destroy things. You just need to start removing. Start by creating space. Reduce how much time you give to people who leave you feeling worse. Be more intentional about who gets your attention, your presence, your energy. As Epictetus once said, keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best. It's simple wisdom, but it's hard in practice. Because sometimes those toxic relationships are with people close to us. Family, longtime friends, colleagues, even romantic partners. And walking away, or even stepping back, can feel disloyal. But here's the truth. Loyalty to others should never come at the cost of disloyalty to yourself. You are not obligated to keep relationships that diminish your light. Not out of guilt, not out of fear, and definitely not out of habit. So what can you do? Start by getting honest. Make a list of the people in your life. Not with judgment, but with awareness. Who makes you feel supported, energized, safe to be yourself? And who makes you feel small, anxious, or constantly second-guessing? This list isn't about cutting people off. It's about choosing how to invest your time. Once you know who uplifts you, spend more time with them. Text them more often. Make space for them. Nurture those connections. And for those who consistently drain you, start small. Pull back. Limit contact. Set subtle but firm boundaries. You don't owe access to everyone. You don't need to be available to people who take more than they give. And if a relationship truly matters to you, but feels off, try having an honest conversation. Sometimes people aren't aware of how their behavior affects you. Sometimes things can be healed. But if you've already tried, and nothing changes, you have every right to let go. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about yourself to choose peace. It's also important to realize, not everyone in your life is meant to go the full distance. Some people are lessons, some are detours, and some are reminders of who you don't want to become. Letting go quietly is not weakness. It's maturity. It's choosing to protect your energy without turning it into a spectacle. And as you release what no longer serves you, you'll start to feel lighter, clearer, more centered in who you are. The space you create will invite better things in, healthier friendships, deeper connection, and more peace of mind. So ask yourself today, am I spending time with people who see my worth, or people who slowly make me forget it? Your relationships should support your growth, not stifle it. They should feel like soil, not cement. Now that you've learned to protect your emotional environment, there's one more internal pattern we need to look at, one that often hides in plain sight. Not in people, but in habits. Specifically, the ones that chip away at your peace, your time, and your self-respect. Let's move on to number 3, breaking free from destructive habits. 3. Destructive habits, the silent patterns that drain your power. Not all battles are loud. Some happen quietly, behind closed doors, in the background of your everyday life. You're not yelling, you're not falling apart, but slowly, subtly, you're unraveling. It might be staying up late scrolling your phone, even though you promised yourself an early night. It might be reaching for that extra snack, not because you're hungry, but because you're stressed. It might be saying, I'll start tomorrow, day after day, until your momentum disappears entirely. These are the small habits, the ones that don't scream sabotage, but still steal from you every day. The Stoics understood that not all threats to your peace come from the outside. Some come from the inside, from the routines we accept without question, the behaviors we excuse, the comforts we cling to that quietly keep us stuck. Seneca, one of the most grounded Stoic voices, said it best, the greatest power is self-mastery. But let's be honest, that kind of power doesn't come overnight. Self-mastery isn't dramatic. It's not flashy. It's not about pushing through with brute force. It's about noticing the moment you say, just 5 more minutes, and realize it's an hour. Noticing the times you choose distraction over action, not because you're lazy, but because you're tired, overwhelmed, or afraid. It's about taking full responsibility, not in shame, but in clarity. So, what are the destructive habits in your life? They're not always obvious. They hide in normal. They hide in everybody does it. They hide in routines that feel comfortable but leave you unfulfilled. Maybe it's procrastination. You delay the things that matter, convincing yourself that you need the perfect time, perfect conditions, perfect mindset. But days pass, then weeks, and the things that matter most stay untouched, waiting for a version of you that never shows up. Maybe it's mindless scrolling. 10 minutes turns into an hour. You go in for a quick break, but come out feeling numb, drained, disconnected from yourself, from others, from your purpose. Maybe it's emotional eating. You don't feel hungry, but you feel something. And food becomes a filler, a comfort, a way to soothe emotions you haven't had space to process. The habit itself isn't the issue. It's what it replaces. It replaces awareness, energy, direction, and over time, these small, seemingly harmless patterns create a version of you that doesn't reflect your potential. But here's the good news. You don't have to overhaul your entire life. You just have to start small, quiet, consistent. Pick one habit, not all of them, not the most dramatic one, just one. Maybe it's turning your phone off 30 minutes before bed. Maybe it's writing down your priorities instead of winging your day. Maybe it's replacing emotional snacking with a 10-minute walk, or journaling, or a glass of water. Whatever it is, make it manageable. Make it yours. Then do it, every day, for 1 week. Not perfectly, not impressively, just consistently. At the end of the week, reflect. How did it feel? What shifted? Where was the resistance? And what did it teach you? This is how self-mastery begins, not with force, but with attention. When you become aware of your habits, you become powerful, because you realize that you're not a victim of your patterns. You are their creator and their editor. You can choose again, and again, and again, and each time you do, you reclaim a piece of yourself. So here's your quiet challenge. Identify one destructive habit you've been living with. Commit to replacing it, for just 1 week. No pressure, no performance, just honest effort. Because the small things you do in private determine the strength you carry in public. And when you start mastering your habits, you start mastering your life. Now that we've addressed the behaviors that hold you back from within, it's time to look at the illusion of control, and how trying to manage everything around you can cost you your peace. Let's continue with number 4. Letting go of the need to control everything. 4. The need to control everything, learning to let go and live freely. It's one of the most exhausting habits we carry, and most of us don't even realize we're doing it. The constant need to manage, predict, fix, and hold together every moving piece of our lives. We double-check the email. We micromanage every plan. We worry about how others feel, what they think, how they'll react. We try to map out every detail of the future, hoping that if we control enough pieces, we can prevent anything from going wrong. But instead of feeling secure, we feel tense. Instead of feeling grounded, we feel anxious, frustrated, even helpless. Because no matter how hard you try, you can't control everything. And the more you try, the more overwhelmed you become. That's the irony. The pursuit of control often leads to the very chaos you're trying to avoid. Plans fall apart. People don't behave the way you expect. Life interrupts your carefully structured day with a surprise, sometimes good, sometimes difficult. And when your peace depends on everything going according to plan, you lose it the moment things don't. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that trying to control the uncontrollable is a fast path to misery. Epictetus said it clearly. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. That distinction, simple as it is, holds the key to your emotional freedom. Because when you focus your energy only on what is within your control, your thoughts, your choices, your responses, you reclaim power. You stop wasting time on the weather, the traffic, the mood of your coworker, the opinion of a stranger, or the outcome of something already out of your hands. And in that shift, something opens up. Space. Space to breathe. Space to focus. Space to actually live, not in reaction to chaos, but from a place of calm awareness. So how do you make this shift in a real, daily way? Start with a simple question, especially in moments of tension. Is this within my control? Ask it honestly. Ask it often. If the answer is yes, then do something. Act with purpose. Take responsibility. Do your part. If the answer is no, then release it. Not because it doesn't matter, but because clinging to it won't help. Let go of the illusion that worry equals preparation. You're not giving up. You're choosing wisely where to invest your energy. Imagine this. You're running late to a meeting because of traffic. You can feel the tension building in your body. You check the clock. You grip the wheel tighter. You think of excuses. You replay worst-case scenarios. But none of that changes the traffic. Now ask, can I control this? No. What can I control? Your breathing, your attitude when you walk into the room, the message you send to let them know. That's where your power is. This shift doesn't just reduce stress. It brings clarity. You start noticing how much mental clutter is caused by fighting battles that aren't yours to fight. You stop chasing certainty and start building resilience. Because when you stop trying to control everything, you get to focus on what really matters, your response, your values, your growth. You become less reactive, more adaptive, not because life is easier, but because you've stopped trying to dominate it and started moving with it. And the people around you feel it too. They notice your calm. They trust your steadiness. You become the one who doesn't panic when plans change, because you've trained yourself to focus on what's real. So here's your practice. Next time you feel stressed, pause. Ask yourself, what part of this is within my control? If it's your mindset, your effort, your words, take ownership. If it's someone else's behavior, or the outcome, or the past, let it go. Train yourself to respond, not react, to flow, not force, to act from intention, not fear, because true strength isn't controlling everything. It's knowing what to hold and what to release. Now that you've learned how to let go of the illusion of control, there's another trap we need to examine. It hides in plain sight, disguised as ambition or high standards. But in reality, it often leaves us feeling constantly behind. Let's move on to number 5, releasing unrealistic expectations. 5. Unrealistic expectations. Freeing yourself from the weight of perfection. You wake up in the morning and set an intention for the day. Maybe it's to be productive, calm, focused, patient, kind. Then the day begins, and reality doesn't cooperate. You run late. Your inbox is overwhelming. Someone says something that gets under your skin. You forget to drink water, skip your workout, and end up doom scrolling for 40 minutes. And by evening, that quiet voice inside you whispers, you failed, not because the day was terrible, but because it didn't match the perfect picture you had in your mind. This is the trap of unrealistic expectations. We don't set them because we're foolish. We set them because we're human. We want life to be predictable, people to be consistent, ourselves to be flawless. We expect every plan to go smoothly, every effort to pay off, and every moment to feel purposeful. But life doesn't work like that. People are messy, circumstances shift, you will have off days. And the more tightly you cling to ideal outcomes, the more frustrated, disappointed, and exhausted you become. That's why unrealistic expectations are so quietly destructive. They make you feel like you're constantly behind, even when you're doing your best. They convince you that your progress doesn't count because it wasn't fast enough, clean enough, or perfect enough. They cause friction in your relationships. 2. You expect others to always understand you, always agree, always behave the way you would. But they don't, and they won't, because they're not you. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic philosopher, said it best. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. You can't control outcomes. You can't control other people. And you definitely can't control the way life unfolds minute by minute. But you can control how you meet each moment. With flexibility, with presence, with compassion, for others and for yourself. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. So what do you do when you catch yourself falling into the trap of unrealistic expectations? First, slow down and recognize it. Ask yourself, am I reacting to what is, or to what I hoped would happen? This simple question can shift your entire emotional state. When a plan doesn't work out, instead of spiraling into frustration, pause. Remind yourself, this isn't failure. This is life happening on its own terms. When someone disappoints you, ask, was I expecting them to act like me, or be who they actually are? And when you fall short of your own standards, consider, am I holding myself to a human pace, or a superhuman one? Because progress is rarely linear, growth is rarely clean, and life is rarely ideal. But that doesn't mean it's not beautiful, meaningful, or worth showing up for. The key is to replace expectation with intention. Instead of demanding that today go perfectly, intend to meet it with focus and kindness. Instead of expecting others to never fail you, intend to respond with understanding when they do. Instead of expecting yourself to always get it right, intend to keep showing up with integrity, even when you stumble. That's how you move from rigidity to resilience. And here's a practical step to help you start. Each time you feel tension building, whether in a conversation, a task, or just your thoughts, pause and ask, what expectation am I holding right now? Write it down if you can. Then ask, is it realistic? Is it helpful? Can I shift it? This doesn't mean lowering your standards. It means grounding them in reality. It means honoring progress over perfection, presence over pressure, compassion over constant critique. When you let go of unrealistic expectations, you give yourself room to breathe, room to try, room to grow on real terms, not imaginary ones. And as your expectations soften, your peace grows stronger, because you're no longer demanding that life be perfect. You're learning to dance with its imperfection, with grace and clarity. Now that you've released the pressure of perfection, It's time to explore another quiet habit that holds many people back. Not a belief, not a plan, but a deeply emotional need, the desire to always be right. 6. The need to always be right, choosing peace over proving a point. Have you ever walked away from a conversation, technically winning the argument, but still feeling completely drained? You made your case, you had the facts, you stood your ground, but somehow, it didn't feel like a victory. Maybe the other person shut down. Maybe the energy shifted. Maybe the connection that mattered more than the debate quietly slipped away. That's the weight of needing to always be right. At first, it feels like strength. You're asserting your view, defending your position, standing for truth. But over time, it becomes something else, exhausting, isolating, and deeply counterproductive. Because when the goal is to be right at all costs, something important gets lost: connection. You stop listening to understand. You start listening to respond. You treat every disagreement like a battleground, not a bridge. And the worst part? Even when you win, you lose. You lose the chance to grow. You lose the opportunity to learn. You lose the emotional space where humility could have taught you something valuable. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus put it plainly: it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. When you're so focused on proving your point, your mind closes. You stop being curious. You stop being teachable. And that mental rigidity, disguised as confidence, becomes a barrier between you and the peace you're actually searching for. So why do we do it? Because being right feels safe. It gives us control. It feeds our ego in a world where uncertainty is constant. But the truth is, you don't need to be right to be respected. You don't need to win arguments to have worth. And you don't need to have the last word to walk away in power. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can say is nothing. Sometimes, the most powerful move is to let it go. Now, that doesn't mean you suppress your voice. It doesn't mean you become passive or let people walk over you. It simply means you choose your battles wisely. You learn to ask a better question than, how do I win this? Instead, you ask, do I want to be right, or do I want to stay connected? Do I want to prove something, or do I want to protect my peace? There's no shame in having a strong opinion. But when the need to be right becomes a reflex, it starts to erode the very relationships and inner calm you're trying to protect. So what's the alternative? Practice listening, truly listening. Not to respond, not to correct, but to understand. When someone says something you disagree with, resist the urge to jump in. Pause. Ask clarifying questions. Repeat back what you heard to make sure you understood. This doesn't mean you agree. It just means you value understanding over dominance. And if the conversation starts to heat up, ask yourself quietly, is this worth it? Am I here to learn, connect, or just be right? That one moment of reflection can shift the entire dynamic. It puts you back in control, not of the other person, but of yourself. And here's something powerful. When you stop trying to win, you often find that people become more open to your perspective. Because no one likes being bulldozed. But everyone appreciates being heard. And when they feel heard, they're more likely to hear you. That's how bridges are built. That's how real change happens, not through force, but through presence. So the next time you feel the need to correct, debate, or prove your point, pause. Ask yourself, is being right worth the energy I'm about to spend? Or is silence, patience, or a simple nod the wiser path today? Letting go of the need to be right isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's the kind of strength that's rooted in security, not ego. You don't have to convince everyone. You don't have to win every debate. You just have to know who you are, and trust that's enough. Now that you've learned how to protect your peace in conversation, it's time to protect your focus in another way. Because even when we quiet our need to be right, there's still one thing that pulls at us constantly: noise. Let's move on to number 7, turning down the volume on digital distractions. 7. Digital noise. Reclaiming your mind in a world that never stops talking. You wake up and, almost without thinking, your hand reaches for your phone. Before your feet hit the floor, you've already scrolled through texts, notifications, emails, maybe the latest headlines or someone else's vacation photos. And just like that, your day hasn't even started, but your mind is already scattered. You haven't checked in with yourself. You haven't taken a deep breath, but you've already absorbed dozens of voices, opinions, and demands. That's the nature of digital noise. It's not loud in the traditional sense. It doesn't blare like a siren or shout in your ear. But it's constant, inescapable, and dangerously effective at pulling your attention in 1,000 directions. Social media, news alerts, group chats, inbox pings, each one tiny, but together, they create a mental fog that makes it nearly impossible to feel grounded in the present moment. And it's not just about time. It's about focus, clarity, presence. Marcus Aurelius, writing nearly 2,000 years ago, said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." In his day, outside events didn't include smartphones. But if he were alive today, he'd probably recognize our digital distractions for what they are. A constant stream of outside events, pulling us away from the one thing we can actually control, our own mind. Here's the truth. You don't need to be constantly connected to be informed. You don't need to reply instantly to be responsible. And you definitely don't need to consume everything to be relevant. You just need to protect your attention like it's your most valuable asset, because it is. So how do you do that? You start by creating space. Small, intentional, quiet space. Turn off notifications, not all, but most. Especially the ones that aren't urgent. Especially the ones that interrupt your thinking without adding value. Set phone-free hours. Maybe it's the first 30 minutes of your day. Maybe it's 1 hour before bed. Choose a time when you let your mind breathe without a screen telling you what to care about. Curate your feeds. You don't need to follow everyone. You don't need every update. Surround your digital environment with content that inspires, informs, or calms, not content that triggers, outrages, or distracts. And most importantly, be okay with silence. Boredom isn't a problem, it's a portal. It's in those quiet moments, waiting in line, walking without headphones, sitting without scrolling, that your best thoughts often emerge. When your mind isn't reacting, it can finally reflect. When your attention isn't hijacked, you can hear your own intuition again. This doesn't mean becoming a digital minimalist overnight. It just means making small, sustainable shifts. You can start tomorrow morning. Instead of reaching for your phone the moment you wake up, try this. Breathe, stretch, ask yourself how you feel. Write down one intention for the day. Then, only then, check your phone. If you need to, that one change can ripple through your entire day. Because the way you begin shapes how you continue. And when you start with your own voice, your own pace, your own mind, you move through the world differently. Calmer, clearer, less reactive, more in control. Remember, your brain wasn't designed to process this much noise, but it was designed to think deeply, to feel, to create, to connect. Give it the space to do that. So here's your practice. Tame the noise. Not completely, not permanently, just enough to remember yourself again. Mute the tabs. Turn down the volume. Make room for stillness. Because it's in the quiet, not the noise, that real strength is rebuilt. Now that you've begun reclaiming your mind from external distractions, it's time to turn inward again. Because sometimes, the loudest voice in your life is the one that lives in your own head. Let's move on to number 8. Letting go of negative self-talk. 8. Negative self-talk. Cleaning the mirror of your mind. You make a small mistake. Forget to reply to a message. Eat something you told yourself you wouldn't. Procrastinate on something important. And before you even realize it, that voice shows up. That was stupid. Why do you always mess things up? You'll never get it right. Of course you failed. What did you expect? It's not someone else talking to you. It's you, talking to yourself. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Negative self-talk isn't always loud. It doesn't scream. It creeps in quietly, casually, like background noise you've gotten used to hearing. But over time, it does something powerful and harmful. It begins to shape how you see yourself. What starts as a passing thought becomes a belief. That belief becomes a lens. And that lens affects everything: your decisions, your confidence, your capacity to grow. You begin to hesitate. You play smaller. You assume the worst, not just about the world, but about your own potential. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, wrote, "Your soul takes the color of your thoughts. And if your thoughts are tinted with harshness, doubt, and shame, so is the way you experience your entire life." So where does this come from? Sometimes it's rooted in childhood. Sometimes in failure. Sometimes in subtle comparisons you've made along the way. But the truth is, your brain is designed to protect you, even if that means criticizing you. It believes that being hard on yourself will help you do better next time. But that's a myth. Shame is not a long-term motivator. Fear doesn't build resilience. And constant self-criticism doesn't lead to growth, it leads to burnout. So what's the alternative? Awareness. You can't change a thought you don't even notice. So the first step is to pause and catch the voice. When that internal criticism starts, don't argue with it, don't feed it. Just ask yourself, is this thought helping me or hurting me? Not, is it true? Not, is it justified? Just, is it useful? Because here's what the Stoics taught. It's not the event itself that defines your experience, it's how you think about it. You missed a deadline, that's the fact. But your interpretation? I'm unreliable. I'm a failure. I'll never succeed. That's the layer that adds pain. Instead, shift the lens. You missed a deadline. Yes. But maybe the lesson is, I overcommitted. I need better time boundaries. That's not shame. That's learning. This doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. It means replacing judgment with curiosity. It means treating your mind like a space worth protecting, not a battlefield of self-inflicted wounds. Try this. Next time a negative thought pops up, don't push it away. Acknowledge it. Then ask, what would I say if a friend had this thought about themselves? Would you say, you're pathetic? Or would you say, hey, that's one moment. Let's try again tomorrow. Give yourself the same compassion. And if you want to take it further, keep a thought journal. Write down the recurring negative loops you hear in your head. Then next to each one, write a more helpful, honest reframe. For example, I always mess things up. Right pointing arrow. I've made mistakes. But I'm learning and improving. Nobody cares what I have to say. Right pointing arrow. I might not be for everyone, and that's okay. My voice still matters. Over time, this practice reshapes your inner dialogue. And when your thoughts shift, so does your energy, your presence, your power. Remember, your mind is listening to everything you tell it. So feed it thoughts that build, not break. Support, not sabotage. Clarity, not cruelty. The goal isn't perfect thinking. It's conscious thinking. Because when you take ownership of your thoughts, you take ownership of your life. And that kind of self-mastery? It's not loud, but it's revolutionary. Now that you've learned how to quiet the noise inside your head, it's time to clear the space around you. 2. Because sometimes, your environment reflects your mind, and clutter on the outside leads to chaos on the inside. Let's move on to number 9, clearing physical and mental clutter. 9. Physical and mental clutter, clearing space for what actually matters. Ever walk into a messy room and immediately feel your shoulders tense up? You can't find what you're looking for. You're distracted by the visual chaos. Your brain starts juggling more than it needs to. And here's the thing. That tension doesn't stop at your surroundings. It spills inward, into your mind. Your energy, your ability to focus. The external clutter becomes internal noise. And over time, it adds up. Stacks of unread emails. Drawers full of, maybe someday, items. Mental to-do lists that keep spinning but never land. It's like trying to think clearly in the middle of a storm. Seneca once said, life is not short, but we waste much of it. And one of the quietest ways we waste our lives is by allowing our attention to be consumed by things that don't matter, but surround us anyway. The clutter isn't just physical. It's emotional. It's cognitive. It's the background stress that never quite goes away because there's always something left undone. Unsorted. Unfinished. But here's the good news. You don't need a weekend-long cleaning spree to shift this. All you need is to start small, with intention. Pick one drawer, one shelf, one folder on your desktop. Declutter it. Wipe it down. Let it breathe. And notice what happens to your mind as your space clears. You'll feel lighter, clearer, more grounded. Because your environment influences your inner world more than you realize. But this also applies to mental clutter. Sometimes the most overwhelming mess isn't in your closet, it's in your head. Racing thoughts, worries you haven't said out loud, ideas you haven't explored, emotions you've tried to ignore. They pile up just like the old receipts in your junk drawer. So what do? You create space, not just around you, but within you. Start by writing things down. Not beautifully, not perfectly, just honestly. What's been sitting in your brain? Stealing your attention? What thoughts keep looping when you lie awake at night? What fears or decisions or emotions have you pushed to the side? Put them on paper. Get them out of your head and into the world, where they're easier to work with. You don't have to solve everything right away, but naming the mental clutter makes it less heavy. It creates psychological breathing room. Think of it like cleaning out a drawer of tangled cords. At first, it looks overwhelming, but once you pull everything out and lay it flat, you can see what to keep, what to toss, and what simply needed entangling. That's what journaling does for your mind. And just like physical clutter, mental clutter builds up when you don't give yourself time to pause. If your schedule is crammed with back-to-back tasks and constant stimulation, there's no room to process anything. So consider this. What if clarity isn't about doing more, but about removing what gets in the way? Here's a simple practice. Once a day, pick one small space to clear, physically or mentally. Maybe it's that pile of mail. Maybe it's your desktop. Maybe it's sitting down with a notebook and writing for 10 minutes. Not to be productive, just to create space. Because in that space, you'll find peace, focus, creativity, presence. You'll start to notice how much unnecessary noise you've been living with, and how little of it actually matters. And once you start clearing, something beautiful happens. You begin to prioritize again. You stop reacting to everything and start choosing what deserves your energy. You remember that a simpler life isn't about having less, it's about making room for what matters more. So here's your invitation. Today, clear one corner, one surface, one page in your mind. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Create one, now that you've begun freeing yourself from the physical and mental clutter. It's time to examine one of the most common, and most destructive, sources of inner unrest. Comparison. Let's move on to number 10. Letting go of constant comparison. 10. Comparing yourself to others, returning to your own path. You're scrolling through your feed. Someone just got promoted. Someone else is traveling the world. Another person just hit a major milestone, wedding, house, six-pack abs, new business, viral post, and in just a few seconds, without even realizing it, you feel smaller. You were fine a minute ago. But now you're questioning everything. Why am I so behind? How come they're already there? And I'm still here? What's wrong with me? This is the trap of comparison. And in today's hyper-connected world, it's never been easier or more dangerous. You're constantly exposed to curated versions of other people's lives. Highlight reels, success stories, perfect angles, filtered wins. And while you're seeing their best 5%, you're living with your entire reality, flaws, struggles, slow progress, self-doubt. Of course it's going to feel uneven. But here's the truth you need to hear. You are not behind. You are on your timeline. And your journey, no matter how messy or delayed it feels, is still valid. Still valuable. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, said, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." He didn't say, "Get there fast." He didn't say, "Compare your path to someone else's." He said, "Just keep learning, keep growing, keep living." The only person you need to measure yourself against is who you were yesterday, not who someone else is today. So how do you stop the cycle of comparison? It starts with awareness. Notice when it's happening. What triggers that voice in your head that says, "Not enough"? Is it a certain app? A certain person? A certain time of day? Once you identify the trigger, don't just shame yourself for feeling it. Interrupt it. Remind yourself, their path is not mine. Their success is not my failure. Their pace does not define my value. Then, refocus. Instead of obsessing over where someone else is, ask yourself, how far have I come? What have I overcome? What small step can I take today to move forward? That's where your power is. Not in comparison, but in commitment. Commitment to your own journey, your own pace, your own process. Here's a simple daily practice to help anchor this mindset. Every evening, write down 3 things you're proud of. They don't have to be huge. Maybe you got out of bed when it was hard. Maybe you handled a difficult moment with grace. Maybe you kept a promise to yourself. Celebrate it, because those small wins, they build momentum. They remind you that you are growing, even when it doesn't feel like it. Also consider limiting your social media use, especially first thing in the morning and late at night. Not because it's evil, but because your mind is more vulnerable during those hours. Give your brain space to wake up on your terms, not in reaction to someone else's life. And when you do scroll with intention. Follow people who inspire you, not trigger you. Consume content that encourages growth, not comparison. Use technology as a tool, not a mirror to measure your worth. Because here's the truth. Comparison kills joy. It turns progress into pressure. It turns gratitude into scarcity. It turns your personal, meaningful journey into a race you were never meant to run. So next time you feel yourself shrinking in someone else's light, pause. And remember, your path isn't supposed to look like anyone else's. It's yours. Unique, unfolding, sacred. Walk it fully. Because the goal isn't to win at life. It's to live it honestly, courageously, and in alignment with who you truly are. Blank. Blank. And now, you've reached the end of this journey, 10 quiet but powerful shifts. Rooted in ancient Stoic wisdom, designed to help you clear space for peace, clarity, and true growth. You didn't need to add anything. You just needed to let go of what no longer serves you, drains you, or pulls you away from your deeper self. Because transformation doesn't always look like a breakthrough. Sometimes it looks like a small decision, a quiet moment, a simple choice to live with more intention and less noise. So which of these 10 will you let go of first? You don't have to do it all at once. Start small, start today, and trust that even silent changes can lead to a very loud kind of freedom. If this video helped you breathe a little deeper or see things a little clearer, don't forget to like, share, or subscribe. And most importantly, keep showing up for yourself. Until next time, stay grounded, stay focused, and stay true to your path.